He never called him this drug.
I call this regular meeting September 25th, 2018 to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the agenda before us. Do I have any additions, deletions, corrections to the agenda?
Oh, yes, I do actually.
All right.
Under law director, I'd like to add easement acquisition.
Okay, have that anything else? If not, then we will start with the monthly report for the sheriff. Who's going to give that this evening? We have the major, two sergeants, and a detective. So
Something's going on
yeah,
here.
is this rank or you lost the toss?
I just wait to see who moves and then kind of, yeah.
I'm just here to say hi.
Good evening, everyone. In front of you should have the August 2018 monthly report. Excuse me. Our calls for service continue to increase. I think that's been the going trend this year. 46% increase as opposed to last year. I think I looked at last month and it was like a 44%. So I think that's going to see the trend from this point forward. Our crashes were up 28% with 69 total. We had 13 crashes with injury, another increase, 109 alarms, 288 traffic stops with a 38% increase. Citations were slightly down with 144, which is still, I think, a significant number. Our arrests were up with 57 total, and we completed 106 vacation checks for the month. Detective Ross had 23 cases assigned to him. Of those cases assigned, he was able to close 2 robberies, 3 missing person reports, and 2 thefts. And I believe the robberies and the thefts were all with warrants issued or arrests made in regard to those. Next page is just our comparison to 2017, and then our yearly will be the last page from 2013 every year on. So, any questions?
Questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Normally, I would ask this time if there's anyone in the audience that
We're
has
the
a
law.
question, but I'm going to guess and say they probably do. Okay, that takes us to the fiscal officer's report. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you. Fiscal Officer number 1 is a request for resolution to authorize the payment of pending warrants in the amount of $328,530.59.
I'll move on fiscal officer number 1.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Abstain.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 2 is a request for a resolution to authorize payment of regular payroll in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
So moved. Second. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 3 is a request for resolution to authorize the payment for the following medical claims.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 4 is the investment report for August. Total interest was $15,636.65. If anyone has any questions, I'm available after the meeting. Fiscal Officer number 5 is the bank reconciliation for the month of August. Again, if there's any questions, I'm available after the meeting. Fiscal Officer number 6 is a request for a resolution to authorize the following transfers.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 7 is request for resolution to authorize a refund as follows for overpayments for EMS service as requested by Ohio Billing.
So moved.
Second, it's been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And that concludes Fiscal Officer report.
Thanks, Tom. That takes us to the administrator.
Thank you. I have a rather lengthy resolution for the board tonight that I will try to hit the highlights on. This is a resolution in support of House Bill 602. Be it hereby resolved by the Plain Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, whereas a small number of municipalities across Ohio have been charging outside communities a higher rate for water and sewer than they charge their own residents, even when the municipality that owns the system has used Ohio and federal taxpayer funding to create their system. And whereas upon investigation, certain duly elected Ohio representatives have learned that the Ohio EPA does not regulate pricing for these services or provide any complaint process, nor does the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio have jurisdiction, mostly as a result of Ohio's constitutional home rule provisions. And whereas the representatives' proposed solution would be to allow municipalities to charge outside communities whatever rate they wish, as long as they do not accept state or federal funding for their systems. And if they choose to accept state or federal funding, specific proposed consumer protection should be established that would ensure fair treatment. This is a common sense reform to help Ohio taxpayers all be treated the same. Township residents have no recourse but to pay the higher rates, and further resolving that the trustees support this legislation, which would end what we call forced annexation over water and sewer services, and then to forward the copy of this resolution to our representatives Thomas West, Kirk Schuring, Scott Olslager, and Speaker of the House, of Representatives Ryan Smith, and Ohio Senate President Ray Pop. Also our Governor and the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Township Association.
So moved.
Second, it's been moved and seconded, discussion.
I did have a conversation with Kirk Schuring last week on this very matter. It's likely, probably have to be reproposed or picked back up in the new legislative session. Based upon the guidance that he provided, it was introduced relatively new, I think by Senator Duffy, or Representative Duffy. And, yeah, he's outside Columbus, and,
Yes.
Given that it's so new, and they're not coming back into session until right after the elections, and it's breakneck speed on finalizing stuff that they've already really vetted and talked through quite a bit. This getting passed this year is probably a long shot, but it's something that I was told would like to come back in the next session, because they've been already getting some calls from the OTA. So I asked Lisa to make sure to have this for us, and then even at the County Township Association, we're looking to do something similar to represent the 17 Stark County townships on this. I mean, when you really do think about it, the money that they're taking from all of us, at some point, through state or federal dollars, that for their benefit, then still charge us 2 to 4 times more.
And this is supported by the OTA also.
It
Ohio
is, it's
Township
one of their
Association,
legislative
because obviously
priorities.
It affects everybody outside of municipalities in the state of Ohio exactly the same way.
Everybody.
So it just makes sense. So it's not a regional or a localized thing, it's the whole state.
And if, Mr. Wolf, if you could make a, not this evening, but a copy of it and certify it for us, then I can get out the mailings.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
And that's the end of the administrator report.
Thank you. That takes us to the Fire Department Chief Schallenberger.
Thank you. Item number 1 is our monthly report. We have a couple pictures there from a couple of the drills we did with the school, and Station 3's in there because we did repaint or paint all the garage doors and the stucco and stuff on the front, so it's got a new look, and did some work at Station 3.
Yeah. Looks nice, yeah. Good job. Thanks.
Good. Item number 2 is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees to authorize payment to Stark State College for 6 firefighters to attend a Rope 1 technical training course, an amount not to exceed $3,000.
So moved. Been moved and seconded, discussion, that's going pretty good, right?
Yeah, I think it helps us out. We don't have to send people away. It's a little closer, so we don't have so much travel expense. And it's a 4-day course, and it helps us keep everybody up to date for our confined space training, our trench rescue and that. So some newer guys in it, so we can keep getting people trained for that.
Yeah.
I was just concerned, what exactly, help me out here, exactly is?
Rope 1,
Yeah.
it's just basically a training on, NFPA says you have to have a certification to do some of those other disciplines like confined space, trench rescue, technical rescue stuff. And so basically they're knots, they do rappelling, hauling systems and that, so it gives you that baseline to be able to do those other tasks.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Item number 3 is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees to authorize reimbursement to Brandon Makel in the amount of $400 for healthcare membership according to Provision 37 of the collective bargaining agreement.
I'll move on to number 3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Item number 4, resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees to promote James Russell II, Brandon Ogden, Adam Farley, and Ben McGee to the position of lieutenant effective 0700 hours on January 1st, 2019. Wages and benefits to be set by the current collective bargaining agreement.
So moved. Second. It's been moved and seconded, discussion.
Yeah, we have one position that we needed to fill due to a vacancy. The other ones are what we're going to call floating lieutenants to help with supervision at the outlying stations. When lieutenants are off, vacations, etc., this gives us a person in supervisory to make sure we have things done and we have somebody, a little more experience, I guess, at the seat for fire calls and to make decisions. So.
Yeah, there's some pretty good leadership there. Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And that concludes fire department. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. That takes us to road. Before we get started, our road superintendent, Joe Iacino, has an excused absence this evening. He's still recuperating. So in his absence, we have Paul Burke. So it's all yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Road number 1 is the monthly report. Road number 2 is no parking in Diamond Park allotment for the Bothwell Cup.
I will so move on road number 2.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Thank you. Road number 3, again, is no parking for the temporary no parking for the Bothwell Cup.
So moved.
Second, it's been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Road number 4 is a resignation letter from Raymond Isla, effective October 5th.
So moved.
Second, it's been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay. It happens.
Road number 5 is the authorization to purchase and deliver and set dry wells for the 49th and Linford project from Lindsay Precast, amount not to exceed $2,658.54.
So moved.
Second's been moved and seconded, discussion, that's just that project we've been kind of wanting to get moving
We've been
along.
wanting to do this for a long time.
Yes.
What height the dry wells have to put in there? You know,
They're gonna be 10 foot
10
total,
foot.
same as,
Similar to what you did on 20th off of
exactly the
Lakeside?
same thing.
Oh, those seem to
25th.
work too.
Mhm.
That one on Lakeside, off of Lakeside, is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, really good.
Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes,
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
if I may, Mr. Paul, I had several calls last week. I was very busy for some of our residents, and Paul, you did a nice job.
Thank you.
You took care of it, you got back with me, and I appreciate it, because, you know, you're stepping it up now. Joe's not here, and very professionally and nice job, I appreciate it.
Yeah, he's done a great job, he really
I would
has.
echo that, I had him looking at garbage bags last week. It was right on.
Did you,
Yeah,
from the inmates?
Yeah.
Picking
Yep.
up the trash.
Mhm.
And there is a 3 to 4 week lead time on these dry wells, so it'll be a month from now.
Matter of fact, one of the residents didn't even want to talk to me. She said, "Who are you?" And I hear my name, she goes, "Well, I'm dealing with the road, I'm not gonna deal with you." So there you go, so it was all good, because Paul took care of it. It was.
Good job, Paul.
Thank you.
yeah.
He's been up every day, several times a day at admin, keeping me abreast of every situation. He's got it handled, he's done a great
Very
job.
good, buddy.
One other
Good job.
issue is that we have a OBI checkpoint tomorrow night
Mhm.
that we're involved with the sheriff's department
Good.
on Middle Branch, and the second one on Harrisburg tomorrow night.
Great job, Paul.
Is that public
Thanks.
use? No,
Thanks so much.
so don't put it out? I won't put the video up right after.
We don't broadcast that until tomorrow.
That's fine,
The
this,
location.
this won't make public until.
Yeah.
For a big audience tonight. Jessica, don't write that down.
All right,
You're on TV.
that takes us to zoning, Mr. Ferrara.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first item on the agenda is the monthly report.
Questions or anything? Okay, let's go to number.
Second item on the agenda is a resolution to declare items A through D as nuisance abatements.
I will move on zoning to A through D.
I'll second it. Been moved and seconded, discussion.
The only thing I want to make a comment on is specific to 2B. These whole, the clothes and shoes, that container, I think we had them over in Diamond at one point, we had them pulled out. I mean, this organization that runs these is absolutely atrocious and poorly. It's nothing but a cesspool of,
Yeah.
it's like a magnet for trash. This one's at Harmont 3801.
Kmart.
Okay.
Yeah, Kmart. So that doesn't
Actually, there
help.
was three, sir.
Is it, oh, yeah.
The first one got dumped there, and then two more followed.
Yeah.
It's just,
And I think we're looking at.
Yeah, Tom wrote some
that
very good
is all
language
also
for
part of that
zoning.
proposed language that we're gonna look at for those, and some regulations that we don't have right now, that we can actually then, start to do some things with, some enforcement, stuff like that, so. Anything else on 2A through D? Roll call.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
And item number 3 is a resolution to declare items A through C as nuisance abatement payments.
so moved.
Second's been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
And that'll be all for zoning.
Thanks, Tom. That takes us to Parks, Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. Item number 1 is the monthly report.
Any questions, anything? Okay, number 2.
Item number 2 is a resolution to increase Christina Taylor's
pay rate from $9.29 to $10 an hour to match the rest of the seasonals from Fund 14A01B for duties performed for the Township Parks Department with Bessie Haynes.
So moved. Second's been moved and seconded, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
I'm not seeing number 3. The number 3 is a resolution. Authorize payment of $1,600 for the repaving of the diamond entrance and exit around the boulevards, as well as the strip right in front of the building, running east-west.
Yeah, I got it.
We don't have that. Do you have it?
I have it in the office.
Oh.
I have a copy in my office, but
Can we go get it? So
Yeah.
we don't have it. So we can at least read it for the record.
This is the-
That's the way it's.
what you talked about, to be correct?
it's correct.
Yeah. That's, yeah, that's.
Yeah, well, Rob said I can just do a quick reminder on that, so we can keep moving, as
All right.
we have our Fall Fest tomorrow. It's the last farmer's market from 4 to 7, and there's gonna be pumpkin painting, family pictures, a balloon artist, some games to end up our final season with our vendors. So it's also the fire station open house during the Fall Fest. So the station will be open for tours and time to speak with the chief and.
There's some free rides in the elevator. Yeah.
That's right.
Rob's orders were all in. What's Rob? Rob can be the conductor.
Yeah.
And Tom. And that little, oh my gosh. Every time I think of that.
Should we do Parks 5?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's, please.
So Parks number 5 is a resolution to authorize payment to Know Your Roots in the amount of $3,162.50 from Fund 0F0AL for the farmer's market coordination.
So moved. Second, it's been moved and seconded for Parks 5. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes. So getting back to number 3, you
I
don't
gave
have
my
it.
only copy to Marilyn, so I'll have to put it aside until next time.
Yeah, but you want to start on that, don't you?
Well, we can do a,
We can get started and authorize.
we can do a
payment.
verbal resolution and put it into the
Do
record.
we know what the cost is?
Yeah, what is
$6,100.
$6,100, which is high estimate. It'll be less than that, but the entry and exit to Diamond and then in front of it, there, we can't wait on that. It's cash.
Who's gonna be the vendor, is that?
The township's doing it, we're just paying for the asphalt.
paying
They'll
for
use
the
their machine to grind it, pave it. This is raw
So, how about I
material.
could go this area, clean it up for me if I.
Sure.
So I'll make a motion for Parks number 3, the Diamond parking lot be hereby resolved by the Plain Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, to authorize payment for asphalt and concrete work at the Diamond Park east entrance lot, for work to be performed by the Plain Township Road Department in an amount not to exceed $6,100.
And it'll be paid from the general fund improvement of sites.
I'll second that then.
It's been moved and seconded, discussion. You guys did a nice job on the fire department entrance, so.
Thank you.
You know, that's kind of like the same thing.
It will be.
Yeah, it's,
Same
that came out real nice.
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, not good.
you know, I think we're saving a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what we
you know,
got.
by doing that, so. You
We
know,
all
that just
know
kind of
what-
shows equipment
Yeah.
and all the other things that we buy and we purchase and we plan for pays off in the long run.
Pays off,
so,
it sure does.
But once we grind it, we don't know what's underneath, so
Yeah.
I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah,
But if it's bad, we'll fix it and pave it.
good.
Perfect.
Any other discussion, roll call?
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Okay, so we've already done number 4, we did that while you were out, we did number 5 while you were out. So, we'll move to 6.
This is the last one. There's a resolution from the board of trustees in Plain Township, Stark County, how to determine the rates for tournaments, events based on operating costs on a case-by-case basis, so we can have more flexibility to operate.
I would So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded, discussion.
I think this is just smart
I do
business.
too.
You know, we've learned through a couple situations with folks trying to stronger the township when we did a little deeper dive. When you look at really what's our margin, I mean, we're a $21 million service delivery business here. We essentially had negative margins, i.e. losing money.
True.
Just because of prior efforts to streamline rates and so forth that when applied to some of the tournaments really wasn't working out to our benefit, and given the fact that we currently do not have a harsh levy in place, the user fees are all the more important to covering costs and helping maintain operations. So I think this is no different than any other business, whether you're quoting miles of roadway or getting quotes for different type of equipment, road, parks, fiscal zoning, whatever. This is just a smart thing.
I would agree.
To do.
Previous boards and the current board have always tried to keep prices realistic, but we really are a bargain. When you look around at all these other places that are going on, we're the bargain. And the people that want to do these tournaments, they're making profit. So we have to look at that as well. So, and you know, they're putting on quality events, but we're giving them quality facilities.
And service.
Exactly.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
you know, I think we need to look at that close. So, I like this. Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
That concludes parks, thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to our law director, Mr. Williams.
Yes, thank you, sir. I have one item for you this evening. It is to approve the appropriation of an easement for storm sewer with Paws Enterprises LLC in the amount of $2,500.
So moved.
Second, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. This is for right away.
Correct. This is for the sewer project.
Yes.
This is the one we had to file the appropriation petition on, so it was in active litigation. So we've resolved that, if you'll agree here this evening. I also note that at the end, I authorized, I didn't know who to put, usually it comes back on Lisa's desk anyway, so I authorized that she be able to effectuate the settlement with some of the, you know, signings and so forth.
Okay, because this project, we want to kind of get moving along.
Absolutely.
So, yes, I would
Absolutely.
agree. Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Eric, would it be
Thanks.
safe then to call the county to have them in?
Absolutely. Yes, I've already spoken with the lawyer for Paws and told him that we'll be voting tonight. I'll call him tomorrow, tell him that we're good to go, and then we'll start the paperwork process. Okay?
Very good. Thanks, sir. That's it for the law director. That takes us to communications.
Yes, we have one item under communications tonight, and it's from Plain Local Schools, from Mary Goodell, and it reads, Rob, thank you so much for being a part of our Family Fun Day at Glen Oak High School. We appreciate so much your continued partnership. Mary. That's the end of communications.
Good job, very nice. That takes us to public speaks. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address the board?
Major, everything the same.
Anyway.
Major.
Going once.
Okay. Any concerns of the fiscal officer?
No concerns.
And then our next item is the approval of the minutes for September 11th.
Also moved.
Second, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
We have no need for an executive session tonight, so,
Not yet.
yeah, I will.
20 minutes. I own it.
Really, I mean, we haven't,
I've got it done in 20.
It was my long
Yeah, it's
resolution.
23.
I will, yeah,
But pre-you,
are you serious?
it's 11 minutes. Look it up.
he-
Guys,
Somebody
it's
keeps
11
track.
minutes. It was in December, it was near Christmas.
They voted and closed the session.
It was quick.
Might as well be all night now.
All right.
All right, I will entertain a motion
I'll
to
so
adjourn.
move.
Second, it's been moved and seconded, discussion, roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
What?
Okay, I think we're good to go.
Because that's all we plan for.
Paul, we're up.
All right,
I don't know how since we have as far as bucket truck or anything like
yeah, we have our own bucket truck, small, 1 ton.
that. Okay. I'm Mike, from Davy Tree, and asked just to go over some, it's like chainsaw safety, proper pruning, things like that. Assuming you guys have all done some type of cutting or pruning back. So first thing I figured I'd start with is just pruning. Don't know how much you guys know about proper pruning or anything like that, so.
Too much.
You can just probably shut it all if you want to. It's up to you guys. This whole PowerPoint is pretty extensive. We're not going to spend a lot of time on each one. There's 165 slides, and I'm not going to keep you guys here all day worrying about that. Ask you guys a few questions. As far as pruning goes, typically, from what I understand, you guys have some storm damage that you guys get off the roads. Pruning back from the roads, sidewalks, is that pretty much the extent of it?
Yeah.
So I won't go a lot into detail about why do we prune trees in yards, things like that, to improve maintenance, health, things like that. Just corrective pruning to reduce hazards, which you guys do. Aesthetics.
Aesthetics is one issue. We think the tree looks good now, and the homeowner thinks it looks like shit, so, you know, who's ready?
The homeowner.
You're always ready.
Yeah, that runs into the same boat that we deal with. You know, we may prune a tree for so much that we agreed on, and next thing you know, the homeowner says it looks like crap, and we're out there for another 3 hours for free, just taking care of it. Pruning for health, doing some constructive pruning, moving crossing branches, denser areas, things like that. Pruning for safety, majority of what you guys probably take care of, over streets, signs, roadways, aesthetics. And really, when you guys are dealing with homeowners, it's always pretty much up to them. You guys could do a fantastic job, and they're just going to find a way to get mad about it. The standards we follow are ANSI A300 pruning standards, which if you guys ever need a copy or anything like that, I can always give it over to you. You guys may have access to it. And when to prune, you guys really aren't structured to a time of year, like we sort of are, and if it needs done, it needs done. You guys know much about pruning the train growth or directional pruning, anything like that?
No.
Go over that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have seen nice top trees here and there.
Good way to kill it.
Is that the right way there?
Looks good to me. That's why it's up there.
Best way to kill a tree.
Got a nice birch tree. Someone just went and whacked the top off of it, probably just covering up the, what looks to be a golden corral sign or something corral. So pretty much what you end up with there. You whack the top off, you're gonna get a lot of sucker growth coming out. You're just basically gonna have a giant bush that could kill the tree. It could just cause pretty much just a crappy tree there. Pruning removal of dead, disease, dying, decayed branches. That's a majority of the reason why we prune a lot of things. You guys may deal a lot with that, just being in the road department. Interfering with obstructing roadways, anything like that for you guys. What do you guys do a lot with the bucket truck?
Pruning.
Work on it.
Mainly just, they sound like us. So pruning basically over majority of roadways?
Right.
Okay. A few responses to pruning, stimulation at the bud cut, so wherever you cut it at. So if you go in, I can show you guys once the lights are back on. You go in and whack the top, which is terminal buds and there's lateral buds. If you whack that top terminal bud off, you're going to encourage more growth outwards. Whereas if you come in and whack these side buds off, you're going to encourage more growth upwards. It's just a response of the actual pruning cut that's made. So if you get some directional pruning, you can actually come in, cut it back to a lateral branch, and get some more directional pruning away from where you're pruning it back from. So if you have a limb coming out, could be two buds, one growing up, one going down. Depending on where you cut that branch to, you could direct growth upwards, or you could direct growth back downwards towards where you just pruned it away from. Of course, talked a little bit about
the habit of the tree, the age, the size, the timing, how much you're actually taking off. Again, you guys aren't subject to a lot of this because a lot of times we can't prune during summertime period. Insect disease problems, that's a big factor. You guys have heard of oak wilt at all? Oak wilt is something that's been moving from north down south. If you're pruning oak tree, majority of them are in the red oak family during, I'd say, about March, April, let's say about end of April through around September, October. A sap beetle can actually transmit a disease called oak wilt, which you could take a healthy oak tree and within about 3, maybe 4 weeks, if it's infected, pretty much the entire tree smoked. So that's there's the closest cases, which we have a lab in Kent to test a lot of samples that we as salesmen bring into them. Ravenna just had a confirmed case this past 2018 season, and so did Cuyahoga Falls. And so it is working its way south. Timing of pruning, spring, quicker wound closure. The tree's basically putting a lot of nutrients out and energy towards healing over wounds as well as new growth. You guys don't really have to worry about flowering plants, things like that. Worst time to prune oak trees and elms. Don't know if you guys deal a lot with elm trees and Dutch elm disease. Prune during the summertime can cause some negative effects. So flowering trees, again, stuff that you guys don't really need to cover just because of timing for that. You guys aren't really focused on that. Late summer, early fall, worst time to prune, disease and insects, slow to poor wound closure, a lot of sucker sprouts continuing. How branches are attached and determining where to actually prune. You guys heard of the branch bark ridge, anything like that? You're making pruning cuts. So basically you have a limb coming out there, and the actual raised portion on there is actually part of the trunk. So you can see on the oak tree, right there, sort of where on that tree is that branch bark ridge. So where it seemed like you'd want to come back here and make that flush cut where you think it should be without leaving a stub on there. But in reality, for this tree and this growth habit, you're going to want to cut it out there so the tree heals over properly. Similar to what's on there. Of course, that's a dead limb, live limb. You just want to stay outside of that branch bark ridge is what they call it. Do a little diagram up there. Basically following that sort of procedure, make an undercut, make a top cut, limb comes over, make your final stud cut right there outside of that branch collar or branch bark ridge. Just a good way to prune trees. Small trees, big trees, doesn't matter. You go in and try and just whack that sucker right off. A lot of times you end up tearing that. Then the tree's trying to heal over properly. You're left with sort of a, you'll see here in a second. Nice flush cut. So obviously on that, you may have some area here, there, or even up top and bottom. So the tree's going to try and heal that over. But most likely, that's just going to turn into one giant decay patch, that entire limb. This talks about dissecting the branch angle to where you're trying to cut a larger limb back to a lateral, which the ideal is when you're cutting sort of the top down or limb back, you want to cut it back to a branch about a third the diameter of what you're cutting off. So in this case, you're sort of dissecting the angle to where you take from that V right there, you want to go straight down, put you a point, come over, and then it's pretty much dissecting the angle. So it's not the best cut in the world, just because there's really not going to be a whole lot of closure, but it's just the best way to go about making that cut. Shows a few branch attachments where you guys have heard of included and excluded bark, just sort of a fancy term for it. Where this section over here, you see you have two trunks and there's a seam through the middle. I'm sure you've seen plenty of times where you have a two trunk tree, get a heavy wind, one side just splits off, and on the inside down here, there's a black portion, darker color. That's where that tree's actual tissue has not grown together, where you have that seam. Whereas in this case, those tissues have actually seamed together. You don't have any water or moisture getting down in between those two limbs. Good healthy angled attachment. Again, V-shaped forks, high chance of splitting. Again, it talks about cutting or dissecting the angle right there. sure you guys know about single stem, multi-stem trees. Single stem trees growth pattern, straight up, more out to the side. Let's get past this. Sure you guys do your job briefing. Not sure what they had set up there. Doing job inspection, so if you guys are working on larger trees, just inspecting sort of the base area for decay. Anything that could really be a hazard while you're working around or in that area. A lot of times you'll see fungi at the bases of trees. It's a good indication of root rot around that actual tree. I'm sure you guys may see a lot of times when trees come over in the road, you look at the base, there's some fungi or some white growth on the actual say trunk or roots. Just a sign of root rot in there, just a structural defect that can cause a lot of trees to come over. Big healthy trees. Look up in the canopy, tree's nice and green, wouldn't think anything about it. Next thing you know, the tree's on the ground because the root system's compromised. Pruning tools, I'm sure you guys go through the whole gimmick of hand saws, pole pruners, pole saws, chainsaws. Talks about the preferred cut, pruning a lateral branch back to the point of origin, or shortening a branch to a bud or lateral branch, basically. About that third, the 1/3 rule, pruning it back to a branch 1/3 of the diameter. Heading cut.
What's going on?
Does everyone know what a heading cut is at all?
Oh.
Basically, when you're making a heading cut, that's when you have to bring the top back down to sort of a lateral, where sometimes it's not going to be the same diameter, the 1/3 rule. For larger trees, they're not really tolerant to that. Younger trees, you can make that cut, and you're going to get a few suckers that come off there, and the tree will be fine. You may lose entire limbs or leaves on larger mature trees. Talks about pruning nodes, which is basically these little buds on here. Just pruning back to those, directional pruning. You can see a heading cut versus a reduction cut. We're doing a heading cut there. Just cutting it back to sort of where you can on the tree. Or in reality, you want to take it back to a lateral limb, which I can show you guys on the sample I brought in. Proper cut, which one on there, which couple do you think are going to be good ones versus bad ones? Because when I see it, that's more of a heading cut, where you're cutting it above that bud, there's going to be a little stub left there. That'd be alright by me. That one, a little too sharp on the angle, but in reality, it'll be alright. That one, still a little too far above that cut, or that note. A lot on there as far as where to prune. Again, back to that same picture I showed you earlier. Same thing on there. You see that branch bark ridge? That's swollen color. It's actually trunk tissue instead of branch tissue. Just when you cut that, that limb actually heals over. You see there, that's pretty much just going to be a decay patch, going to work its way down through that limb. Like we talked about with rips, making the 3-cut rule, undercut, top cut, and back cut next to the trunk. You can see where there's just a slight rip there. As that callus tissue works its way around, it's not going to heal that portion over. See a few more on there as far as different rips. Nice flush cuts. Nice limb just got ripped off, or actually ripped back into the trunk tissue. You can see on there a lot of good cuts where it looks like a donut, just like what's in the back of the room back there. Just nice round circles. That's what you get when you make those proper pruning cuts. Don't leave a stub coming off the trunk. See stubs there, which you'll see a lot of times in ornamentals when you guys are trying to prune things back from the streets. Sometimes there's no choice, and sometimes there's nothing to cut it back to. If you cut it back too far, homeowner or whoever, they're going to be mad either way. But just do the best you guys can is what I would recommend. Sometimes there's, in our world as well, not a good lateral anything to cut it back to.
So if you got a 20-foot long branch, 10 foot of it's in our right of way, do we cut 10 foot, or do you,
The best thing to do in that case, I would say if you can talk to the homeowner, because if it's just one long limb, 20-foot long, brush on the end is not a good lateral. If you can talk to the homeowner and just say, it's gonna be better for the tree if we just cut this extra 10 foot off, in the end, your tree's gonna be healthier. We're not gonna have to come back through, because you make that cut there, you're gonna get a lot of sucker growth coming off there, and it's gonna cause problems for you later on. So if you can't talk to the homeowner, if they'll let you, just, reinsure them, it's gonna be the best thing for their tree. More stub cuts on there, you pretty much end up either with a bunch of sucker growth coming off a stub cut, depending on the type of tree and type of time of the season, or you just end up with some decay that works its way back down the trunk. So right there you're seeing, I'm not sure where they're pulling that picture from, right in there, but 2 co-dominant leads, that's what we're talking about the included bark, but you can see where they made a cut in there. And what they're trying to get at in that picture is someone's been up in there, they've made a cut, realized they shouldn't be making that cut, and just left it. So you have to put a compromised limb up in the tree. Depending on what you guys are doing and how much you take off, a good rule of thumb is not to take off more than 25% in one growing season, and no more than 25% off a live limb. Do you guys do much young tree pruning if new trees are put in the ground at all? No? Okay. This talks about growth forms of trees. Of course, you guys have seen things like Crimson King maples, northern maples, round and oval, pear trees. Got some dogwoods, willows, things like that, just different types of growth patterns. Talked about dead, disease, dying branches earlier. There's another good one. Just branches rubbing against each other. It's better for the tree if you guys do see that. Just cut, like on this instance here. You have a younger limb and an older limb. Obviously, the older limb's a little bit compromised right in there. You would want to make a cut somewhere down in there, if not removing the whole limb. So this one has a greater chance of living. Talks about thinning. You guys don't do much thinning, I'm assuming? Okay. Double leaders. I guess in your guys' case, if you're working near the street, doing some things like that, you're going to save some hassle later on by removing one of those codominant leads on a younger type tree versus leaving that one go, which has a good angle attachment. Give it a few years. If no one's maintained the tree, thinned it out, installed a cable, most likely the lesser of the 2 leads is going to come off. That is just a terrible scenario. There's no good way to go about that.
Jeez.
Same thing there. I mean, I don't know how you guys run into things like that, but there's no good way to go about that, really. I mean, you can't just go in there and start whacking off every limb. A lot of water sprouts. A lot of times that can happen if you make those heading cuts or cuts during the growing season. Take too much foliage off, you get a lot of water sprouts, sucker sprouts, things like that. Vertical clearance. Obviously, you guys remove a lot of lower branches. We try and maintain that 1/3 rule. In this case, where you don't want to take off from where the lower branches are to the top branches, you want to try and maintain 1/3 of that. So if you're going to raise a tree up, try and leave it as it's only taking 1/3 off. And obviously, as you're clearing up a road, so it's not that easy to maintain that sometimes. See someone just strip that thing all off, and you might as well just cut the tree down in that case. Root suckers. You guys deal a lot with root suckers at all?
No.
Okay.
We have parks guys here too, they're more into pruning for aesthetics.
Which one of you guys are parks guys? What type of pruning do you guys do in the parks? Mainly just for aesthetics, raising over areas, things like that?
We have that, we have suckers, basically, we have new trees that get planted, we have to prune and all that, so, basically everything.
All of the whole ball wax.
both of you guys are dealing with a lot of newer trees. Just take a break from this for a second, just talk to you guys. Newer trees, a lot of things you're looking for are crossing branches. Branches where you have 2 or 3 limbs coming out at the same point, at least trying to eliminate those over a few years time period. Deadwooding, always staying on top of that. You guys won't really have to deal too much with, I'm gonna say, raising or anything for at least a few years once trees have been planted, but the best thing I can say about that, give the trees a couple of years. Once they're planted on the ground, there's no reason to go in there in the first 3-4 years to prune anything. Let them get established, and then go in there and try and do some corrective pruning. Co-dominant stems, you're going to want to try and eliminate those as well. Proper crown reduction, like you talked about earlier, you want to take it back to a lateral, 1/3 the diameter of the actual stem you're cutting off. There's a few examples on this little example here, but you can see there they cut it back to the lateral. I'm sure you guys have seen topping throughout Canton. When it talks about topping, starvation, they're basically talking about starving for nutrients because you basically whacked off the entire top of the tree. I'm sure you guys know it's just a bad practice to do. End up with a lot of sucker sprouts, weak limbs, sucker sprouts is rapid new growth. You get a lot of decay moving throughout those limbs to where you end up with a weaker branch in a few years, and actually about the same size of a tree. Like that right there. And I don't know what you guys' scenario is when you come in and need to prune them back away from the street or anything, but if you can, try and cut it back down to the trunk, somewhere in there, because you just end up cutting off those suckers. Because there's still cuts up there, you have a lot of decay that's going to work its way through there. These sucker sprouts are all just weak angles of attachment. As they keep growing, if no one's taking care of them, you're probably going to end up with some of those splitting off in a road or anywhere like that. Okay. Nice house. Someone's didn't know what they wanted with their trees. Nice park. Trees are probably just getting too tall, couldn't grow grass underneath them, so they just whack the tops off. Round overcuts. If it's an ornamental crowd or something like that, you can train trees to look like that, just not go in there and just whack them off. There you go, there's a good one, a nice topping cut. Just a giant bush. Line stealing, that's another thing. Basically with line stealing, there's a lot of limbs that are actually on the actual branch themselves. As you can see with a lot of these, that actually provides a lot of structure to the limb. I know it's funny to say that, but when you go in and basically just strip a limb up, an entire lead, the line stealing effect is just a heavy bush at the end. So you get a heavy wind or heavy rain without anybody thinning that out. A lot of times you'll have it split off and just cause more problems than it's worth. So good rule of thumb is leave some of these limbs growing up the side. Just do some directional pruning if need be. Shade trees, this just goes into different types of pruning. Stuff you guys, palm trees. I'm sure you guys aren't pruning palms on a regular basis. Tool sterilization, that just goes into pear trees. Don't know how much you guys deal with those in fire blight. With fire blight, it's a bacterial infection. I'm sure you guys have seen those little 1 foot, 18-inch long dead limbs on them. The ideal thing is to sterilize your pruning tools, taking a 10% bleach solution, spraying them off between each cut, and that's crazy.
No?
I mean, there's no real good way to go about it. If you can take it back to a larger limb where you don't have to make those pruning cuts, that's going to be the best way. Dutch elm disease, same thing. You guys are pruning elm trees in the summer. It's already got some elm disease on there. Taking it back with fire blight, the best rule of thumb is to cut it back at least 18 inches past where it stops at, to not have to worry about disinfecting your tools. It should be within that top 18-inch portion. Depending on the size of the tree and severity, it could be a few foot or a few inches. Talks about, of course, some galls, fire blight, sterilization tools. I think most of the stuff is, nothing you guys really need to know after that. So, back to the BMPs, for best management practices, moving healthy branches, diseased branches, and dead branches last. Of course, for you guys, a lot of times it's just pruning back those stems away from the street, sidewalk. So I don't take up too much more of you guys' time as far as pruning goes, unless you guys have any questions or anything you'd like answered. Guess pretty much good on that.
Evidently.
Cool. There's some chainsaw stuff here in a few minutes, but if you guys want to, an hour later, there's some pruning cuts that have been made on there. This is actually one of our trees from our tree farm that just sort of died off over the past season. Just sort of shoved it off to the side and really didn't have a use for it. So if you guys want, I can show you a few things or just take a look at it. As far as chainsaws, how many guys use chainsaws? Quite a few of you?
Everybody.
Everybody. What are some key safety things about chainsaws? Chain brake. So you got your chain brake. Anything else? Operator. Down on the bottom, chain catch. And then, I'm sure you guys are going to talk about kickback. We basically take this top quadrant of the saw. You want to make sure that you're not hitting on anything. We had a guy, probably about 4 years ago, running my 040 Ford, flopped the tree over, 16-inch ash stub. Basically just flushing the stub off of the base, wasn't paying attention, had his right foot up, making a cut like that. Well, as his tip came around, he wasn't watching where that tip was. It hit that log, he just flopped over on the ground, came back, whacked him right in the shin, broke his actual shin, and tore a lot of tendons right there. Not a lot of blood, nothing like that, just a lot of shock. He had chaps on. He was a shorter guy too, didn't figure it mattered. With him cocking that leg up, just like your pants were kneeling down, raised it up above that area down there. And I was, in high school, same thing. It's all about watching the tip of your saw. We were out to school at Kent Roosevelt. They had a river forestry program. Just running like a 28, 20-inch bar on there. Just cutting my brush on the ground. Wasn't watching where the tip was. Ended up zapping just right behind the steel toe of my boot. And it happens just in an instant. Blood starts coming out, and next thing you know, you're just rushing to the hospital. So as far as safety things go, chaps, this is an older pair, so I was able to cut it open. I'm sure you guys have either seen or heard about the chemical that's on the inside and what it does. Whereas you're running it and it hits, you may end up with some scratches, because what it's supposed to do is basically bind up in here and just stop the saw. Because you know it's the same thing as you getting your saw pinched, and it just stops it like that. Same thing there. Got a bigger saw out there, but I'm sure you guys know about drop starting saws. Not an appropriate way to do it. Always either have it with your foot on the ground in that flat area that it has, or tucked up in here. That way we have control over top of it. The rule of thumb, they always tell us at Davy, is always keep your thumb wrapped, no matter what you're doing. A lot of times you want to, no matter where you're making a cut at, you want to have your thumb up top. You want to keep it wrapped, so that way if something does happen, saw kicks back, you have control over it. Saw's up top, and it can hit, and your hand's not completely attached to that bar. And anything as far as chainsaws go, I'm going to show you guys this quick little thing. Just going over a few things, only a few slides, but you guys have any questions so far? just talks a little bit about chainsaw, how fast it's moving. You guys know about the curve, that's basically the line it makes. You always want to keep your body and your head off to the left-hand side of that curve. Never want to look straight down it. Just that's all it does, kick back, that's the first thing it's coming at. Injury locations, you can see there's a few up to the head injuries, majority of them are in the leg area. Just watching where you're cutting, when you're cutting. PPE, hard hat, ear protection, eye protection. Not all about you guys. Best thing to carry is a whistle, because when you're running the saw, you could yell, you could throw a stick in front of somebody, but that whistle cuts right through that sound. You want to get somebody's attention. ANSI standards, hard hat Z89, eye protection Z87. You guys already know all that. PPE, chaps, gloves, pants, boots. We always require steel-toed Davy. First aid kit always on site. Like I said, phone and whistle on site communications. For us, we always have to know where the closest hospital is at, what's the best way to get a hold of them in case something does happen. We have that already established when we get to the job. Went over some safety features. Chain brake, kickback guard. The throttle trigger interlock, it's not something we really talked about, but that's where you have to have your hand pressed down on top before you can force the trigger. Chain catch, stop control. That's just the control on top to stop it. Two hands on the saw at all times, thumbs wrapped. Left hand top of the handle, of course, you know, if you run it to the side. Just talks about making sure the bar's tight, tension on the chain. A little bit about the parts of the saw tooth. I don't know if you guys go over that play too much. As far as what I know, you have your, of course, top plate, your side plate, your depth gauge, your working point, and your chisel. So when you guys are sharpening the saw, let's go over that for just for kicks. When you guys are sharpening the saw, do you mainly focus on this point, or a lot of times you find yourself where the file is actually grinding down there? Because if your file is actually grinding down here, you're not getting the job done well. The main point you want to focus on is from right here going up. You start getting to where it's filing down here. A lot of times you get too close to where the, I can't remember. Somebody help me out. Rivets. Yeah, the rivets are going through. And if you hit rock or something like that, you've actually filed too close down there, you can actually fracture that and cause that chain to break by just improper sharpening of the saw. Leg lock and ground start method. Kickback point. Make sure you keep an eye on that tip as much as possible. And obviously if you're cutting around a big limb or something like that, always just keep an eye and know where your tip is at. That's it. If you have any questions or anything like that, or pruning or chainsaws, safety, you guys feel like I covered anything for you?
Thank you.
No problem. Did you guys learn anything about pruning? Let me ask you that.
We'll do a lot of our pruning in the fall. It's because we're out in the winter time, so we're getting the branches cut away so we don't hit our trucks while we're out salting and plowing, and we slow down, not as much to do. So about now is when we start pruning.
It's going to be about the best time. I don't know how much you guys do during the summer, but if you can say pruning,